around to watching all the Bourne movies for the very first time, so let's talk about it. Welcome to Cinema, where we focus on the film. I'm Josh, this is Simply Cinema. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of the Bourne franchise as a whole and how you would rank the films individually. Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it, subscribe if you haven't already to join in the film culture community where we talk about a lot of the cinema as a whole. But going in last place, we have the Bourne Legacy. Now this is an interesting one just from the forefront because we got Jeremy Renner instead of Matt Damon, and Jason Bourne is nowhere to be seen in this movie because it only is mentioned with Matt Damon having wanted Paul Greengrass to continue as the director for the films, and they are missing him, and so we got Tony Gilroy, which isn't a particularly bad director, but within this case, you're absent of the core character that lacks the substance to carry on the motivation. And for me personally, I went into this film blind, not even knowing that fact, and so I was lost for a good amount of time thinking Jeremy Renner was just a replacement for Matt Damon for this film, being Jason Bourne. But even as I learned it, it still doesn't particularly make this film any more interesting because you know it's sort of this side quest, sort of spin-off type of deal where Jason Bourne is still out there, and yet it doesn't really fit in with the franchise all that well. Even though the filmmaking is pretty good, the action is good, the mystery of the story itself just doesn't hold the right substance that works as a whole. And at number 4, we have the Bourne Ultimatum. Now this is one that works well as a closing to the original trilogy, if you would even call it that, just sort of circling up and tying the bow on certain ideas of figuring out who Jason Bourne is, his past, and everything that goes about along the way. There's little bits of mysteries and action here and there, but what holds this film back for me is just the filmmaking is very sloppy, the camera work here and there. I know action-packed work can be really quick camera in order to make it feel more intense, but for me personally, it just made it look like a mess and hard to follow at certain points of the film and just unappealing. And once you get so distracted with that, the boring and bland environment becomes just so repetitive over and over, especially the third film in, when the story doesn't get attached to you, everything else does. And this one, in this case, just doesn't have the right setting that really pops forward with the story that is all told. And at number 3, we have Jason Bourne, a reboot sort of deal that I didn't expect to be as good as it was, and while it isn't particularly fantastic, it just does cycle me right in, and it brings us full circle with the franchise, almost acting like the end of what I talked about with the trilogy. But in this sort of sense, it closes off and adds extra details that sort of caps off pieces to Jason Bourne character. We didn't necessarily need those pieces, but it was still entertaining, and the filmmaking was particularly better than what we've seen from Paul Greengrass in the past. And so just how that all flows throughout, just getting pieces of Matt Damon's character and also other characters and emotional depth to other people that are attached to him, and what is aiding him along the way, what we're getting from the agency, and everything we get out of Tommy Lee Jones as the main villain. What that has to offer, as well as who he's working with, just adds enough flavor to the mix of the franchise that brings a little bit of a compelling motive for me to be able to pay attention, follow along with the action, have a good time with it overall, even if it isn't particularly the best in the franchise. And at number 2, we have the Bourne Supremacy, a good sequel for its own means, following up with something that is just grand for the nature of where it's heading off. And now that Jason Bourne really is sort of familiar with his past, even if it isn't a complete package, knowing full well who he was, having all the answers of his past, we get more action this time around in the particular case in which you get to follow through and there's not as much stops along the way that gets him sidetracked or goes about these little tangents of subplots. There's still some investigation in him being hunted down, and so it's a chase sequence and him trying to take out those that are attacking him, as he's also figuring out who's on top, what sort of agency is all working on in the background now that the other agency is down. And so how that all follows through from the first movie just goes about a great film, having good action. The camera work is still a little messy in this one, with Paul Greengrass now becoming the director for this film, but Paul Greengrass still has a handle on what works with this character, following through with something that does effectively work with an element of intrigue within the action, but also with the story, the plot, and how you're building the enemies around them and seeing the motivation, and Matt Damon as Jason Bourne also being able to discover who he once was in the past by witnessing those that are hunting him down. Which takes me into number 1, we have the Bourne Identity. Now this one is just right up my alley. It isn't a masterclass film for the nature of how the camera work flows, but Doug Liman is a great director that pulls off the action with this one, and not only that, but holds a compelling mystery throughout us just not knowing who Matt Damon is playing as Jason Bourne, and Jason Bourne having things that have gone on in his past that he just can't figure out, having lost most of his memory, having started the film in this predicament where he's lost in the sea and he's uncovered. And so what all that pulls about throughout the whole film, it's a mystery that unravels slowly and slower, but the way that it gives us little hints and nuggets along the way that just treats us with the surprises, the twists, and understanding the motives, and also this dark web of agency that he once worked with, while also adding in the touch and thematic element of what it is to have the morality of killing someone and working with that sort of institution. Just goes about a way that we don't understand Jason Bourne as a character fully by the end of the film, but it still closes its own chapter, works as its own film that just satisfies the complete package. And while there is some element to where once the full twist of who he is revealed, it's a little quick in that aspect of the film, but throughout that you still get a satisfaction of everything that the film has been building up to, taking us into multiple different settings, different environments that were on the run, and also exploring the world in such a different way, discovering the past life of Jason Bourne as he is discovering it himself. Just the way that unravels the character just becomes compelling throughout the mystery aspect of the film as a whole. And so therefore, that's my ranking of the Bourne franchise from my least favorite to my favorite. Let me know down in comments below what you would rank the Bourne franchise as, and how you think of the Bourne franchise as a whole. Do you like it? Do you not like it? Or is it somewhere right in the middle? Make sure to like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe if you're not already to join in the film culture community where we talk about the love of cinema as a whole. So that's just all, and make sure to do yourself a favor and go watch a movie.